Am I gonna do
Hi, I'm Hyson Cisco from Morality and Media, and we're celebrating the 27th annual White Ribbon Against Pornography Week. We're continuing our free online events this week with Dina Alexander, the founder and president of Educate and Empower Kids. Their goal is to encourage youth to develop a healthy sexuality through love, communication, education, and empowerment. They do this by providing the resources all parents need to prepare strong and resilient children who are ready to overcome the challenges placed before them. To all our viewers, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter them into the chat section, and we'll have a Q&A at the end. I know many of you are holding local events to fight the effects of pornography, so we're grateful you're joining us for our free online events. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Dina, and take it away.
Hi, thank you, Hyson. So as she said, I'm Dina Alexander from Educate and Empower Kids, and today I am talking to you about preparing for the inevitable, your child and porn exposure. Next slide, please. So I've been involved in this movement for a little over a year and have been doing continuous research on the effects of pornography and the younger and younger ages to which our kids are being exposed. The first step in preparing for our children and helping them is to understand that they are all going to be exposed to pornography, that there is basically no way around this. This is the culture we live in. This is the day and age we live in with the 24/7 accessibility to online services. Our children will be exposed to pornography. With the tidal wave of internet-enabled devices that all of our children seem to have these days, they're going to be exposed to pornography, and many of them will be unless we can protect them and prepare them. So as I've done a lot of research, I've decided and I have figured out for sure that pornography has always existed. It's existed forever and ever since anybody could write on a cave wall or take a photograph. Pornography has always existed. But with the onset of internet, this game has changed. It's no longer just an artful, quaint picture of a naked person. We need to understand that it is a violent, degrading form of entertainment. Next slide, please. We need to understand that it's an industry, and our children are highly susceptible to this. It wasn't always an industry. It didn't become an industry until 1953, when Hugh Hefner started Playboy magazine. Suddenly, the opportunities became amazing for people when it came to pornography. And it's just progressed and progressed until what we have now is online pornography. Now, what we need to know to understand and prepare our children is the nature of pornography. So the definition of what we had as children or as teenagers for pornography is completely different than what our children are being exposed to. Again, before we had just pictures, we had to go across town to a seedy location, to an adult bookstore. We had to get a magazine from a friend. It's no longer like that. Right at our children's fingertips is online pornography. And with it, every disgusting, imaginable thing that can be done to the human body is being done to the human body, save perhaps killing a woman. Throughout the internet, anything goes, and this is teaching our children to normalize deviant behavior and to think that misogyny is normal and acceptable. First thing we need to understand is that our children's brains are not equipped to deal with the images that they see. Their brains are far more susceptible to our brains, which are usually finished developing in our early 20s, that all throughout high school, all throughout middle school and younger, as they're exposed, their brains cannot deal with what they're being exposed to. Their brains, as they see pornography, can be rewritten in the same way that drug use can. So just as heroin or cocaine can rewrite our kids' brains with creating new pathways thanks to dopamine and its continual flooding of our brain in drug use or pornography use, they get new neural pathways that are created, and this rewrites the brain. This can form an addiction, can form a tolerance. So then what does our child need to do in order to, after they've created a tolerance for this? They have to seek out more violent forms of pornography in order to satisfy that craving, just as a drug user has to use more and more of their drug of choice to create that. Another thing that we need to remember as parents is that this is being created by an industry. I know that this was something that was surprising for me as a parent, as I thought of the porn industry as a mom and pop industry, as something small, something not to be considered. But we need to realize that they're one of the most powerful entities in the country right now. Their $12 billion a year revenues make them very powerful. They make them powerful in politics. They're powerful in business. There's a reason why they are able to function as they do, because they are a powerful entity. They have more clout and more money than all of Hollywood combined and every major league sport combined with it. This industry, we need to understand, is targeting our children. And I know that this is something that is sometimes difficult for us as parents to accept. Why would somebody target my child? But we need to understand they're in the business of making money and nothing else. They're not in the business of art. They're not in the business of helping other people. They're in the business of making money. So in doing this, they're willing to addict children and teenagers in order to have lifetime clients. They want to hook our children and bring them into the fold. So what do I mean by that pornography alters one's perceptions and beliefs about sex and relationships? Well, we need to understand that in pornography, there's no intimacy, right? There's no hugging, there's no kissing, there's no friendship, there's no courtship of flirtation, hand-holding. There's just this continual, there's just a barrage of act after act, right? So if our children are constantly being exposed to just certain acts, then that's what they are going to that's what they're going to say that sex is. That's what they're going to think sex is made up of. Not all the wonderful, amazing steps that lead up to sex, but just the act itself, right? And so they're also going to, if they are also constantly seeing a woman in a position of powerlessness, they're going to think that that is what's normal. They constantly see a woman being called a whore, a slut, or much worse, then they're going to think that is what's normal, right? Just as when I drove a Honda Pilot, I remember thinking that everybody drove a Pilot. It seemed like everywhere I went, I saw a Honda Pilot. It's the same kind of thing. If I'm seeing something over and over again, if I'm participating in it, it becomes normal to me. I think, oh, this is what everyone's doing. If I'm continually watching images of group sex, anal sex, then I'm going to think, oh, well, everybody is having group sex, obviously, right? It's everywhere. So this is altering our children's behaviors, who they are not understanding that what they are seeing is a performance by actors and actresses, right? So normalizing deviant behavior, what do I mean by this? You know, surely it cannot be that bad, it cannot be that terrible, but it is. There's a reason why teen is the #1 search term for pornography. When we normalize grown men having sex with teenage girls, which is a deviant behavior, if we're seeing this over and over again, it becomes normal to us. Now, what do I mean by celebrating misogyny? Well, as most of you know, or as I hope you're understanding, pornography dehumanizes people, usually women, right? A woman is never a woman in pornography. She's either a slut, she's a whore, she's a hot this, she's, whatever. And why do we do this? Why would the porn industry do this over and over again? Why isn't she a woman or a lady? Well, if we identify with this person as a human being, we're going to feel bad about what we're doing and what we're looking at. So in order to keep us from feeling bad about what we're looking at, we're going to dehumanize the person that is being objectified and hurt and coerced into sex, right? So we don't want to have to face that this might be my sister, my wife, my girlfriend, my mother. So we're going to turn her into something else, an object that wants this, that deserves this kind of treatment over and over again. Next slide, please. All right. Now, there are some things that we can do to protect our children. Now, these are not the fix-all. I remember when I first got in, I thought that this was the fix-all, that if we could just put filters on our computers, that all would be well. But they're really just the first step, right? So one of the first things you can do to protect your child, especially your young children, is to install internet filtration, okay? This can be done at the device level with software like K9 and NetNanny. There are many, many, many other services available online that you need to research and decide on. My family uses K9 for the simple fact that it's free. It's easy to download and is simple to use. When we come across a site that is blocked, if we think it's an okay site, I type in a password and my kids can look at it, right? Not a fix-all, but a first bandage to put on the wound of this gigantic problem. The next step could be at the router level. So if you go to opendns.com, there is another system of filtration there which will filter all of the devices in your home. Now, there are also other internet service providers that offer filtering, but once the device leaves your home, then it's on its own. So there are things that you can install on your phone that are also available to help you as a parent. There's also different monitoring systems that can be done through your cell phone carrier, like Verizon or Sprint. If you talk with them, they will tell you some very simple tools that they can use where instead of filtering, you can also just monitor their behavior, right? So the final bullet on this is you can monitor your children's habits and friends on social media. So now this is something that you as a parent need to think about and need to decide what is appropriate and what you want to do. Does your child deserve a certain level of privacy or not? You as a parent are going to have to decide that. My children I have one child on Facebook right now, and I know who her friends are. When I look through her list, I have a discussion with her. Who is this person? Oh, are they from school? Where did you meet this person? Oh, I know that person. I don't know this person. Or even sometimes occasionally telling her, I'm not comfortable with you being friends with so-and-so. You need to delete them, right? Maybe this is too much. Maybe this is too bossy. But again, I'm in charge of my child, and so I need to make that choice, just as you need to make that choice of what is appropriate. But I think you need to be aware of what your child is doing. If there is an app on your child's phone that you don't know what it does, it shouldn't be there. It's, they're your child in your home. You need to help them and guide them. Next slide, please. You also need to be aware of what kind of texts they send, what kind of texts they receive. Is your child a kind, helpful texter, or are they turning into a bully? You need to be aware of what your child is doing. Okay, so here's the bulk of the presentation. So you can prepare your child. There are many things we can prepare our child. The first, and to me the most important thing, is to openly and honestly discuss sexual intimacy, the opposite of pornography, with your children. If we want them to understand why pornography is counterfeit and fake and wrong, then we need to show them what the alternative, which is human sexual intimacy, okay? You need to make it age appropriate. You know each of your children, or your child, one child, and you need to discuss it according to their age. You also need to tailor the discussion that it will be appropriate for each child. You need to teach them skills to self-monitor their behavior. This, to me, is the ultimate goal for my child, is I want them to be able, when they leave my home, to self-monitor. So I'm not going to keep them from every evil in the world out there until they leave home. I'm going to start creating these habits of self-monitoring as young as possible so that when they're out on their own, they're ready to face the world. Number 3, with your partner and your children together as a family, you need to create a media standard in your home. You need to be on the same page together, making a standard that each of you can live with and can be accountable for. Finally, you need to model positive behavior. Next slide. All right, now as we talk about being open and honest and discussing sexual intimacy with our kids, we need to first talk about what is keeping us from talking. They don't feel prepared. They feel that they're not an expert, and they don't feel like they're healthy sexually. I've had this concern expressed to me by several parents over and over again, that they don't feel that they are sexually healthy, so how can they possibly talk with their kids about it? They have an issue. Maybe there's been abuse in their past, and they feel that this is something that they just cannot talk about. And I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. We need to talk about this over and over again. Okay? So in addressing the fact that our child is too young, we need to understand that they need to know about it before they arrive at the danger. Am I going to tell my child about a predator down the street after the predator has already made contact with my child, or am I going to talk to them about predators before they've even talked to a predator? I need to do that ahead of time, right? I need to talk to them before the danger has occurred, right? Same thing with something as amazing and wonderful about sex. If I want to be the first best source, I need to talk to them before somebody else does, right? Creating too much curiosity. Now, this is something that I have heard from a lot of different parents. And I have to say, I disagree with it. You know, there's some children that are going to be curious no matter what you do. I have one of those children, and I love it. I think it's natural. I think it's normal. I think it's awesome that he is curious. I want that. I want to encourage that kind of curiosity. There's nothing terrible and wrong about sex. So guess what? I want them to know about it as soon as possible, right? Now, being embarrassed, I find that the people who are the most embarrassed are people who have waited the longest, right? The longer you wait, the more embarrassing and awkward it's going to become, right? Maybe you feel like you're not an expert. Well, guess what? None of us are experts. I am not a professional chef, but I'm still going to teach my children how to cook before they leave home, right? I'm still going to do it. I'm not a professional. It doesn't matter. They need to know from the person who cares about them the most, me, right? Now, you might have a certain issue. Maybe you've had problems. Maybe you've made mistakes that you're not proud of. I don't think these are detriments. I think we need to look at these as guideposts, as a way to share with our children and to help our children learn from our mistakes or from maybe a circumstance that we didn't want and that we want to protect our children from. We need to use these experiences to help our children. Okay? Now, the final point that a lot of people are concerned about is that they themselves watch pornography, and so that they don't feel that they can talk about pornography with their kids. It's not off the hook. If I was a smoker, I would still be talking to my children about the dangers of smoking, okay? They need to know, and I am their parent, so I need to do it. It's not, you do not get off the hook just because you watch pornography. Next slide, please. Now, what is the other option of just staying silent? So what does our silence tell our children, right? I think it tells them that it is something secret, that maybe it is something bad or wrong or dirty, or that it's something that we shouldn't discuss, right? If we send that message, where are they going to go? They're going to go to Google, they're going to go to their friends, they're going to go to somebody else that maybe we don't trust, that isn't the best source of information. So we need to remember what our silence and what our awkwardness conveys to our children. I think when it comes to a sensitive topic like this, children are like sharks and they can smell blood. And if you're silent or if you're awkward, they're going to know that there's something else. Any mystery or sordid feelings that might come from this come from us. We need to create this as a healthy, positive, wonderful experience for our children. And also, I feel like if we do not talk about it, we're teaching our children that there's a lot of things that they cannot talk to us about, not just this one topic. If we've created silence around one topic, it's most likely we've created silence around several topics. Next slide, please. Do I keep talking? It says live. Aha, there it is. Yay. All right, so tips for talking about sexual intimacy and its opposite, pornography. Okay, so this is where we need to be honest with our kids. We do not want any lies or misinformation around this topic, right? So we need to be the first best source of information. Right? So if you're going to approach this from a very scientific point of view and you want to describe to your child how much sperm is produced in a day or a month, then you need to read up on that and be prepared to talk about that. If that's not the way you want to approach it, then you research and decide what is the best way for your child. Each of your children is going to be interested in a different aspect of sexual intimacy, and you need to help your child and guide them through this process. Okay? Another important point is you need to talk with your partner ahead of time, right? You need to be on the same page. Are you going to talk about one thing? Am I going to talk about another? Are we going to do this one topic together? Maybe you want to handle this topic. Should we be one-on-one, or should we do this as a group? Another important point that I feel is that we need to plan the talk, plan the various talks, but you don't want to create an event. Now, I want you to plan this because then it takes the awkwardness out. If you know the points that you want to hit upon, it's going to take some of that awkwardness out, but you do not want to create an event per se as to what you're talking about. Why don't we want to create an event? Well, if we've created an event, then how is our child going to be able to recreate that event? We want our child to be able to recreate the same scenario so they can ask us questions anytime they need to. So whether that's a discussion at home, whether you've taken them out on a one-on-one date, don't make it so serious that the child cannot recreate it, that it's a once-a-year occurrence that we're going to have a sex talk, or that they talked about pornography and I know we cannot talk about this again. We need to make this as comfortable as possible for our children. Finally, and probably the most important, is that it needs to be a continual dialogue. I do not believe in one sex talk, ever. It needs to be over time that evolves over and over again. Just as it took us many times to learn our multiplication tables and to really have those sink into our head as a child, we need to learn over and over again that sexual intimacy is an important, amazing thing that is to be shared with the right person at the right time. Next slide, please. All right, when should we start these conversations? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here and disagree with the experts of my childhood in saying that I don't think that you should wait for them to ask the question. Now, I was always taught as a parent that we should wait to answer questions when they're asked of us. Wait until the child brings the question to you. I no longer believe that that is the case anymore. I believe that you need to approach these topics before they come up. Why is that? Because I want to be the best first source of information. Studies show over and over again that we believe the first source we hear, as a child and as an adult. We believe the first source. And guess what? I want to be the first source to my child, right? And especially as you send your children out into the world, we cannot protect them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whether you send them to daycare, whether you send them to kindergarten, whether you send them to an aunt or uncle's house, if you do not trust these people 100% with your children's lives, then you need to have prepared them as they go out. Another important factor to consider, if your child can operate a tablet or a phone, then they need to understand about pornography, right? We don't want to wait until the first exposure to have that conversation. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to share everything we know about pornography with our children, right? We're going to keep it simple. There is going to be a time to talk about different issues with each child, right? For somebody who's age 3, 4, 5, 6, I think that you can keep it to just 3 or 4 points, right? The first most important point, we don't look at pictures of naked people. For someone of that age, we also are going to let them know we don't take pictures of ourselves when we're naked, and we don't let other people take pictures of us, and we do not take pictures of other people who are naked, right? And finally, we're going to talk to a trusted adult when we see these things. This is how simple it can be. This is how simple it can start when we're talking about pornography, okay? When it comes to sexual intimacy, same thing. We're going to keep it simple and tailor it to each child. Now, for an older child, you can add extra information according to what their maturity level or what you feel like they need to know. Next slide, please. Okay, so what does your older child need to know? Here we go. They need to know that pornography is a counterfeit. They need to understand that pornography is created by an industry for supposed entertainment, right? That this is not intimacy, that this is not how people wish to be treated at all times, that this is not, that it's fake, that it's dehumanizing to women, and that it's addictive. They need to understand the dangers out there, just as my parents talked to me about the dangers of cocaine or heroin when I was a child, and I understood that they could be addictive. We need to convey that to our children as well. Now, understanding that it's dehumanizing, for whatever reason, this is the point that really struck my children the most. This is what hit home to them. When they understood that these were people who were being treated poorly, they were able to understand that this was something that they wanted to stay away from, right? When they understood that these were women often being mistreated, when that there was often being that there was a coercive nature to pornography, is often being portrayed, and also on the point of the actors and actresses, that this bothered them, that they understood, even as children, that this is not right, that this is something to stay away from. So understanding that it's dehumanizing. If we can convey to our children that this is not how, we do not want to refer to women as whores and sluts, and that they do not need to be slapped around, they can understand that when we can teach our children the negative nature of this and what this means to us as a society, that as we, that we have an industry treating women so poorly, that when you constantly are seeing a woman in a position of powerlessness and inferiority, that this is not a good thing for them as individuals and for us as a society. My children were able to understand this, and I think your children will be able to understand this as well. I think they also need to understand that porn is created by an industry that is targeting them, that they want them for the sole purpose of money. I think letting our children know this, they can understand, they can feel that there's something wrong with an industry that wants to create an addiction within them for the sole purpose of making money. Next slide, please. So how do I start and how do I continue? So I think the first thing that we as parents need to understand is that we direct these conversations, whether we're talking about sexual intimacy or whether we're talking about its going to come over and over again, right? So next, you want to share your values and your expectations with your child. Again, it's your home. These are your children. They need to know what you expect and what your feelings are. What your feelings are on various aspects of sex. When one should have sex. When it's okay to start. Should it be in a relationship? Should it be in a committed relationship? You need to decide what your values are and explain those to your children. Explain the great things about sex. Explain the negative parts when it's the right person at the right time. And let them know that you have expectations for your home. So conveying to your child that they can always come to you for questions. So how would you do this? So you as a parent need to think about what other situations have you lent your children help and advice and that they knew that they could come to you? Was that because you were a great math tutor? Was it because you helped them on a problem in their life that they were really concerned about? What were the same situations and words that you said that your child knew they could come to you for help? You need to convey those same messages when it comes to healthy sexuality and when it comes to pornography. Okay, you need to accept that you're not going to do this perfect. I'm not perfect. I've had many, many conversations with my children about healthy sexuality and pornography, and it's never been a perfect conversation. But I've done my best, and that's all anyone expects. I have conveyed correct information. I have conveyed it with love and caring from a parent, and that is all that any of us should expect from ourselves. Next slide, please. All right, what should you do if your child has been exposed? Now, for many of us that have older children, we need to understand that it might not just be a single exposure. We might discover that they have a habit. We might discover that they have an addiction. And we need to be prepared and compassionate towards these circumstances. I've heard from many parents say that the first signs they saw were just simply a withdrawal, that they saw that their child was behaving a little differently, that just as a child might, if they were involved in a drug habit, same kind of withdrawal, same kind of discomfort, same kind of sadness. So first thing I want you to stop and think about is, how would I want my parent to respond to this? And I always think about this time when I was a teenager and my mother found out that I had made out with a boy, right? It was no big deal. I was an 8th grader. And she was very upset about this. And so guess how much information I conveyed to her in the future when it came to romantic notions? Not very much, right? She freaked out and I was done sharing that part of my life with her. So we need to stay calm and we need to reassure our child. We need to let him or her know it's natural to have these curiosities. It's normal to want to know about sex. It's normal to see these images and many times be aroused by them. They need to know that there's nothing wrong with them, that this was normal, that this is a normal part of life, but that you can help them, right? Using guilt and shame to discuss this does not help. It doesn't help. It didn't help any of us as children, and it won't help our children, right? Even if you find out that your child has been using pornography for months or years, you need to be on their side. Let them know that you were there for them, that you love them more than anybody else, and you're going to help them out. Next slide, please. All right, number 2, teaching skills to self-monitor. So this, to me, is the ultimate goal in all of this discussion. If we can teach children to self-monitor, right? So the first thing we want to teach them is to just generally avoid pornography, whether that's certain friends. They know which friends are using pornography if they're older. And you probably know which homes and which situations they might be exposed, right? You know which friends perhaps, or perhaps you don't. But that's why we need to talk to them about it. So the first point is to avoid pornography. That also might be helping them to avoid sexting. If they know that that's going around their school, if that's becoming more common in your neighborhood, you need to address it and let them know that this just is not right. They need to know that they should not seek it out. So what do you need to do? You need to give them an alternative. What is the alternative to finding information about sex? Is it just Google? Is that the only place your child can find information on healthy sexuality? No. You need to help them find those resources, whether that's you, whether that is certain books. Help your child find the answers that they need. Now the next few, I think, go hand in hand. Naming it when they see it, deconstructing the image, getting away from it, and telling a trusted adult. So naming it, I think, is important because it dispels the fear. I think for small children especially, being exposed to pornography can be very traumatic. But it can also be very confusing because they might also be aroused by it. So what is a child supposed to do with these kinds of feelings of arousal and trauma? You need to help them sort these feelings out, right? They also need to deconstruct the image. Now, what do I mean by this? They need to be able to look at this sort of thing and other hypersexualized media and know that's fake. That's not how people want to be treated. This is not healthy sexuality. This is its opposite, right? This is something that an industry has created for entertainment. They need to be able to deconstruct that. Another hugely important part of this is helping them to separate the violence and the sex. So often in these images, we ignore the violence because it's combined with sexuality. This is common over and over again in television, in movies, and in pornography. The violence seems to fade away because it's combined with a sexual act. We need to let them know, no, you do not slap, push, hit, kick a woman when it's, that they need to be able to separate that from the sex, right? That it's not just because it was combined with the sex doesn't make it okay, as so much of our society is trying to teach us. They need to know that they can get away from it, that they can call you, that they can talk to you, that they can text you, that they can just let you know, this is what I've seen, and this is, and that they can get away from it, that they don't need to stay. If a friend is looking at it, if it's at lunchtime, if it's at a sleepover, that they can get away from it, and that they can talk to you or another trusted adult. Discuss with them who the trusted adults in your life are. Is it just you and your partner? Are there one or two other people that you guys can decide is a trusted adult? You guys as a family need to decide that. Now I put a mark with the last bullet point. Because I think you and your children will have, that's not right. We shouldn't be looking at that. That is objectifying women. That is dehumanizing women. It's wrong. I think I would encourage you and challenge you to have that discussion with your child and to challenge them to speak up about pornography. To not just to have that be like, oh, this is just my own private thing. That can they speak up and help protect their friends against pornography? Next slide, please. All right, number 3. So with your partner and children, you're going to create a media standard in your home. Now, being on the same page, this is not going to be a one-sided discussion. This is something that you want to have openly discussed with your family. So the first thing you need to do is to take inventory of all the devices in your home. Television, computers, laptops, phones, tablets. And I think that you will be as surprised as I was as you find, 1, how many devices are in your home, and 2, how many hours you're spending with screens in your life, right? So take stock of the social media that your family is using, the television and video streaming services, the video games, books and magazines, and figure out how much time each person is spending on these devices. Third, write down how many hours and write down the location of where these are. Is the phone constantly in your child's room? Are they hiding the history? Are they keeping this private? What are they doing with their devices? How much time is being spent? Next slide, please. So after you have taken inventory, discuss the standards of media for your home. So what are you guys going to seek out and what are you going to avoid? I by no means think that you need to keep all media out of your home. Media has many benefits. There is tons of great music out there. There is tons of great television, books, magazines out there, and you need to seek out the best. What is the best for your family, for your age group of children, for you as adults? What is going to be allowed in your home? What time allotments are you going to have? Something that's been useful in my home is that we were able to program it right into the computer that my children have a 1-hour window that they're allowed to use the computer. As they've gotten older, the older kids have a longer amount of time they're allowed on the computer for homework. On the weekends, maybe it's going to be more time that they're allowed, but you're going to decide that as a family, what works for you and what works for your children. Next, you want to be accountable for the media you consume. How are we going to remain accountable? Are we going to keep the computer in the middle of our home where everyone can see it and anyone can walk by? Is there going to be a time of day when we no longer allow phones to be used? Are we going to keep our phones and tablets off the dinner table? Are we going to enjoy that time without media? These are the kinds of discussions you want to have with your kids and make rules that work for the family together. What kind of compromises are you going to need to make? Discuss that as a family. And then you want to teach them about rules for social media. So what kind of information are we going to allow our kids to share online? My kids have a fake birthday that they put online. I don't know how useful that is, but they have certain things that they do not share. They do not share the location. They don't do check-ins on Facebook. We do not check in and let people know where we're at any given time. I do not want them putting too many pictures online. We discuss this as a family and have certain rules that work for us. Make the rules that work for your family. Finally, you want to teach them how to self-monitor. What are some rules that we want to have outside the home? Okay, we have this phone, we have this tablet, we go to our friend's house. What are the rules that we're going to establish? And keep to those rules. Next slide, please. So next, you want to be able to create some alternatives to media that work for your family and have non-media time together. What works for you? Now, this, as I discussed this with my children, was much harder to come up with than we had originally thought. And it was an eye-opener for me to see how dependent we as a family had become on various forms of media. I had been really proud of ourselves that we had kind of made rules in our home that my kids could not watch television unless they read first. They had to read for a half an hour and then watch television for then they could watch TV or play on the computer for half an hour. But also I find that this has not been the best choice because I'm also creating media as a reward. Do I want that to be the reward in my home? I don't know. We're still working on that as a family. We have not created a perfect system, but I know that we are trying to work on having non-media time together, whether that's walking, hiking, shopping, whatever, to spend time together as a family. Next, we want to encourage coping mechanisms that have nothing to do with the screen. Now, if you're like me, this is going to be much harder for you to change than it is for your children to change. We spend so much time on our devices that we have created within ourselves a dependency. Oh, I have to know what the weather is right this minute. I have to see what kind of, if anybody is looking at my Facebook status. Oh, I need to see what new pictures are on Instagram. We have created a dependency that we need to limit. Are those going to be certain times of day? Are those going to be certain times of night? But again, we need to decide within our own homes other coping mechanisms. Next slide, please. So finally, this is the last point I wanted to make today, was setting an example for modeling positive behavior. So now first I'm going to talk about with media. So there's a certain example that we set in our home. There are certain things that my kids definitely pick up on my behavior. When I'm bored and I immediately grab for a phone, they see that. They model that. They're going to copy those behaviors. If I am watching certain movies, if I am listening to certain music, I love to listen to music when I exercise. But I've had to eliminate a lot of negative music out of my life, things that I didn't even realize were inappropriate or were misogynistic. Those are not the messages I want my children listening to, so guess what? I have to eliminate those out of my music library. Whatever I want my children to follow, I need to be setting that example, okay? Next part of that, though, is modeling the positive behavior of health. We need to model it. We need to show our children a healthy, loving relationship looks. Speak openly about intimacy. Again, that it's not a shameful secret. It's not something private. It's not something to be hidden. It's something to be celebrated and to be enjoyed and to be talking about. That it's okay to discuss it with our kids. Finally, we want to have real life experiences alone and with our children, without media. Where can we do this? How can we do this? Can we set aside time every weekend, every other day? Plan it so that it happens. Next slide, please. So that is my presentation, and I would love to hear any questions that you might have.
All right. I don't think we have any questions for you. You've probably been very thorough. Let me see. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing something. I know that sometimes it was freezing, so let me just make sure.
Well, that's okay. If people have questions, they can go to our website, educateempowerkids.org. They can also email us at the email is info@educateempowerkids.org. They can ask any questions, give feedback to this hangout, if they have suggestions, if they thought something, if they didn't agree with something, we would love to hear it. So again, that's info@educateempowerkids.org.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dina. This was very informative, and I hope that we can all take this home and act on it. So again, if anybody has any questions, just email Dina, and you can go to her website, educateempowerkids.org. And we're so glad you could join us, and thank you, Dina.
Thank you.